Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It's me, your favorite Ohioan. So last night there were several important elections across the United States, including the states of Florida. We had primaries in Florida. We had a special election as well as primaries in New York, and we had a runoff in the state of Oklahoma. So I'm going to be covering these results, explain why, even though they were not the best night for Republicans in the America First movement, they were still overall well, they weren't good nights. There's nothing to say overall, but I'm just for other people, I'm saying that this is a bad sign for the midterms, and I think it's still too early to tell, to be honest. So let's start looking at some results. We're going to start in the race to Florida, where they had the Democratic primary to see who would lose to Ron DeSantis. So Charlie Crist was actually the former governor of Florida. He's from the Tampa area. He's currently in Congress, and Charlie Crist is a unique individual. He is one of the most moderate people, or he's not even moderate. He's just like an absolute grifter. He does whatever is politically good for him, basically. So he is the former, I believe, Republican governor of Florida. I think he ran for Senate as an independent at one point, and he is the former governor of Florida, and he was a Republican back then. And now he's a Democrat in Congress, running for governor of Florida as a Democrat. So this guy's politics are just so cursed. He was good friends with John McCain, and he almost ran on the ticket with him in 2008. So Charlie Crist's politics are just, I don't even know what to say. But he did manage to win their Democratic primary against Nikki Fried, who is the very progressive candidate. She is the agricultural commissioner of Florida, and she's very active on social media. She would basically be a squad member. So she lost handily, only winning 3 counties, which is absolutely pathetic for a statewide elected official. But Charlie Crist is still going to lose handily to Ron DeSantis. He just doesn't energize anyone. He's too moderate for the progressives to really turn out, and he's too left for a lot of more moderates to turn out. So I think Crist will do better than Fried for sure, but he's still going to lose to DeSantis by like 10 points or so. And there isn't even an option here to look at the Republican primary for the governor because DeSantis just didn't have a challenger. So not a whole lot to say there. Now we're going over the race to the Senate election, where Val Demings, who is a congresswoman, she managed to win very handily against Brian Rush, who was the more progressive candidate. As you can see here, he did pretty well in North Florida. But both these candidates are pretty awful. They were both going to get absolutely destroyed by Marco Rubio. Rubio, he's not my favorite senator personally. He's iffy on a couple of issues, but he is still solid. He's still very well liked in Florida, and he's still going to go on to win this election very handily. Val Demings is the best nominee the Democrats could put up, but that is not saying much. Let's go over the House elections, where we had some very disappointing results. We're going to first go over to the 7th District, where Anthony Sabatini, an America First warrior, one of the best members of the Florida State Legislature, ran for U.S. House, and unfortunately he lost his primary to Corey Mills, who is a very he's very much a grifter. He's a former defense contractor who wrote a bunch of fake stories about Anthony Sabatini being this horrible person, and Corey Mills is also literally Corey Mills. This guy, he photoshopped him in a picture with Trump to make it seem like he got the Trump endorsement so Republicans would turn out for him. And this guy is a former defense contractor who claims he's this America First candidate. It's like, no, you funded the wars in the Middle East. You're perfectly fine with bombing the Middle East to hell and sending our troops to die. You're not America First. I'm sorry, man. So he, unfortunately, it looks like the amount of money he got was crazy as well. Corey Mills got thousands and thousands of dollars from these large corporations and the Republican Party as a whole, the Republican insiders. So unfortunately, Anthony Sabatini did not manage to pull off the win here. I do hope Corey Mills is a decent congressman. I do have hope for him, but overall, it's not good at all. Come down here, we look at Maria Elvira Salazar, who is, not the worst, but not the best either. She got 80% of the vote. There wasn't really a good challenger against her. I just would have hoped that she did a little bit worse to kind of push her to the right a little bit. But no, she won very handily, which is not good at all. And then we go up here, and we're going to go check out. That's pretty much it for Florida. I don't know if it's Attorney General race. No one cares about this. Yeah, Democrats just had a close primary. They're going to lose anyways. So let's go over to the New York House elections. The primary results. Nothing really crazy to talk about. Claudia Tenney, who is one of the better Republicans from the state of New York, she's actually a pretty solid candidate. She had a very close primary, surprisingly. She's not a great candidate, but she's pretty good overall on most issues. She's about an average Republican, which for New York is pretty good. And she had actually had a very close race, surprisingly, against Mike Fratto, who got 40% of the vote. But Claudia Tenney still managed to win with 53% of the vote. Hopefully this pushes her to the right a little bit, shows her that she can still do well with the Republican base. We come up here, and we have Nicole Maliotakis, however the hell you say her name. She won absolutely handily. She got 78% of the vote in her primary, when she is one of, if not the most liberal Republicans from this New York delegation. So, like I said, although she didn't have a really huge, a major opponent, it just would have been nice to see that race getting closer to kind of tell her, hey, could you maybe like move to the right a little bit? Could you maybe not be a complete moderate? But nope, that did not happen. We come up here, and we have the Democratic primary. There's a bunch of races that happened up here. Um, let's look. We have Jerry Nadler and Carolina Merloni. Maloney was actually endorsed by Donald Trump. Trump decided to do a bit of trolling and make an endorsement in the Democratic primary. He endorsed Maloney, who went on to lose handily. So, although Trump isn't a fan of Jerry Nadler either, Carolyn Maloney, his endorsed candidate, did lose, which I think was the point. Because Trump was smart enough to know that if he endorsed someone, the Democrats whose literally only politics is Trump bad, would vote against his endorsed candidates. So, he knew what he was doing when he made that endorsement. Come down here, and that's really it. So, yeah, Trump's endorsed candidate in the Democratic primary did lose, unfortunately. Very sad to see Trump's endorsement record get tarnished like that. Going over to the governor primary, where, there wasn't really a primary for the governor last time. That's weird they have it on the same page. That threw me for a loop. Let's go over to the special election, which is the big story of the night, and that is the 19th district of New York, which is kind of like the suburbs of Albany, as well as some of the Hudson River Valley, the more wealthier parts of New York, as well as some rural, I guess you could say, farming, working class areas near the central part of the state. This is the district that voted for Donald Trump back in 2016 by 7 percentage points. They voted for Biden this cycle back in 2020 by 2 points. So overall, it's a very competitive district, but it does have a slight Republican lean. And as such, Mark Molinano, who was very well funded, very well known in the district, was expected to win very handily. He was a Republican running. Unfortunately, he lost by about 3 percentage points to Pat Ryan, who is pretty much a nobody. He was like a county commissioner, and he did run a solid campaign. Credit where credit is due. But still, this race, for all intents and purposes, if the environment was so Republican leaning, and this is a leaner Republican district, then why did the Republican lose by roughly 2,000 votes and 3 percentage points? I don't really have a good answer. All I can really say is that I guess the college-educated whites, the more I guess you could say liberal millennial types, are beginning to turn out much more in special elections. Their hive mind on Reddit is beginning to kick in that maybe we should vote more, and this is a sign for Republicans that we got to vote as well. If Democrats are going to be very energized by Roe v. Wade being overturned, and even though we're literally in a recession, they're still going to sit for Biden and turn out for Democrats, then Republicans got to do the same. If we can't just go into this midterm thinking we're going to win because the polls had us up. We had that mentality over the summer and end of spring, and now the polls are starting to show the midterms are getting pretty competitive. And Democrats are getting energized because they see that. They're thinking, oh, we're getting close. We got to turn out. We got to start campaigning. And Republicans are just saying, oh, well, it's just a summer bump. Well, that is true. It still doesn't change the fact that we got to get out there and start working. This is going to be a normal come November. This is an election that we should have won. Mark Molinaro should have won this race by at least 3 to 4 points. That's what I had him winning by. But unfortunately, he lost by about that margin. And that is mostly because rural, working class, I guess you could say more conservative Republicans just did not turn out. Whether that was they didn't like Mark Molinaro, they didn't know there was an election because it was a special election, and I know there was low turnout, but still, it doesn't change the fact that this was still a very winnable seat that we lost. And all it tells me is that Republicans got to get their act together. We got to start getting the word out about the elections. We got to start putting money into some of these competitive races, and we got to start really campaigning and getting ready for November. Because right now the Democrats are starting to crawl back into this, which you hate to see. Going to come over here to this 23rd district, which is another thing to look at, and this is the big reason I think that this race was so close, and that was the fact that the 23rd district is a solid Republican district. It is a very rural, a very farming, very agricultural-based district, and even there, it was still very close. This is a solid Republican district that was still super close. I mean, Max Delapia, the Democrat, lost by about 5 points to Joe Sempolowski, the Republican. This is a district that Republicans should have won by double this. They should have won by 10 to 20 points. Instead, they won by about 5 or 6. And this is why I think it was just the more rural conservative voters, or A, didn't know there was an election, or B, didn't like the candidates. Because that is true. A lot of New York Republicans are probably a little too liberal for your average voter in that part of the state's liking, and so they're not going to turn out. But long story short, considering that happened in this district, which is a solid Republican district, considering the solid Republican district, which is basically all upstate New York, rural farm country, was so close, it makes me think that the 19th district was won by the Democrats because Republicans in this part of the district, kind of near the center, I have my cursor going over, which is a more rural farming area similar to here, they didn't turn out as well. So I think the reason that Republicans lost the 19th was because the more rural, conservative voters either didn't know there was an election or they just didn't turn out, which in either scenario, it means Republicans got to get their asses working to get the vote, to get word out about candidates, get word out about elections, and actually start putting up a fight, because Democrats are starting to get energized. So that's really my take there. We're going to go over to Oklahoma, which we have mixed news. We're going to start in the... Do they not have the Republican runoff? Let's see here. Does NBC not have the Republican runoff? Okay, well, that's interesting. Do they not have the... Does Oklahoma not have... Okay, so there's a... Sorry about this, folks. There was a runoff in the Senate race in Oklahoma, but it does not look like... Oh, here we go. Okay, it's here now. Okay, my bad. So James Langford... Wait, no, this already happened. What? Okay, I'm confused. NBC, their map is confusing me. I apologize for this. Long story short, I'll just talk about the race because, you know, we can ignore what's on your screen because NBC doesn't appear to have the results. I'm sorry. I should not be using NBC. I should be using New York Times, but I'm not going to pay for that. So, long story short, in the state of Oklahoma, the more conservative candidate, T.W. Shannon, he unfortunately lost. There are some polls that had the race being a little bit more competitive, but in the end, nothing really happened. He lost by about 65 to 35. So, and some polls had the race competitive. A lot of people thought that, you know, the T.W. Shannon, the conservative, would be in striking distance, but unfortunately, the more moderate Republican did end up going on to win, which is very sad to see. I wish the Republicans, I wish we had a better senator for Oklahoma. Oklahoma is literally one of the most Republican, oh, is this it? Here we go, okay. Okay, there we go. This isn't the runoff, though. Okay, NBC is so confusing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that rant. I'm sorry about this, folks. NBC is so confusing the way they have this. Okay. The primary election here. Okay. What? TLB Shannon and Mark Wayne Mullen. Okay, yeah, here we go. But this isn't the runoff. Okay, this was the election back in May, not the runoff. I'm so confused, guys. We're just going to talk about the race. So long story short, Mark Wayne Mullen, he is the more, I guess you could say, moderate Republican. He's a representative from Oklahoma. He got 40. Ignore these results. These are just the two candidates. T.W. Shannon was the America First, more conservative candidate. Mark Wayne Mullen was the more moderate Republican. Mark Wayne Mullen did go on to win the election. T.W. Shannon only won one singular county, got about 35% of the vote to Mark Wayne Mullen, 65%. So long story short, not a very good showing for Republicans in Oklahoma. I really wish we did better. Mark Wayne Mullen is not a good candidate for Oklahoma. Oklahoma, like I said, is one of the most Republican-leaning states in the country. We should have a solid America First candidate from that state, an authentic conservative, but we don't. We have probably a grifter, in all honesty. He was involved in defense contracting. He's part of the military-industrial complex. Basically a neocon. Maybe he'll be like a Tom Cotton type. Like Tom Cotton's based on domestic issues like the economy and social issues, but super interventionist. So maybe he'll be something like that, best case scenario. Worst case scenario, he's just another no-name senator who does basically nothing for anything. So, like I said, overall, not very good election results. Like I said, other than Florida, which was basically expected, the new Republicans vastly underperformed in a lot of races in Florida, and down ballot, like in Anthony Sabatini, and a lot of Republicans, a lot of more moderate Republicans skated by very easily, while solid conservatives lost, and even on the and even at the federal level, at the upper ballot, as you can see, like actual elections that really matter. Like Pat Ryan is going to the U.S. Congress after this. He's up for re-election again. He's up again for re-election again in November, but he is going to Congress after this result. So overall, not a very good night for Republicans. We got to get our act together if we want this red wave to keep going. So thank you for watching this video. I apologize for that little bit at the end there with Oklahoma. The NBC results are just not showing the runoff for some strange reason. So I apologize for that. But I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to like and subscribe for more.